The world watched with cautious optimism as Russia and Ukraine met for US-mediated truce talks in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in March 2025. The conflict, raging for years, had brought devastation and instability to the region and beyond. These talks, while a flicker of hope in the darkness, carried the weight of past failures and the immense challenge of bridging deep divisions. Could this be a step towards peace, or just another chapter in a tragic saga? The talks, brokered by the United States, aimed to secure a limited ceasefire agreement. The primary focus was halting attacks on crucial energy infrastructure, a recurring theme in the conflict. Both sides had weaponized energy resources, leaving civilians vulnerable to the harsh winters and disrupting daily life. The international community pressured for a resolution, recognizing the global implications of an unchecked energy crisis. The backdrop of the talks was a world grappling with the economic and geopolitical fallout of the war. Sanctions, military aid, and a global energy crisis dominated international discourse. The human cost, however, remained the most poignant aspect of the conflict. Millions were displaced, families torn apart, and a generation scarred by violence. A key achievement, albeit a tentative one, was the agreement in principle to a temporary halt of strikes on energy facilities. This fragile agreement, yet to be implemented, offered a glimmer of hope. The specifics, however, remained a point of contention. The timing of the ceasefire, the mechanisms for enforcement, and the definition of legitimate targets all required further negotiation. Previous attempts at ceasefires had crumbled, leaving a legacy of mistrust. Skepticism lingered as attacks continued even as negotiations proceeded. The international community urged both sides to show restraint and adhere to the agreement in good faith. The limited nature of the ceasefire underlined the deep-seated issues fueling the conflict. Territorial disputes, political aspirations, and historical grievances remained unresolved. The ceasefire, while a positive step, was merely a bandage on a deep wound, a temporary measure in a long and arduous journey towards a lasting peace. Beyond the immediate urgency of the ceasefire, the talks also addressed the critical issue of the Black Sea grain deal. This agreement, crucial for global food security, had collapsed in 2023, sending shockwaves through international markets and exacerbating fears of food shortages. Russia, a major grain exporter, had withdrawn from the deal, citing Western sanctions hindering its agricultural exports. Moscow demanded the easing of these sanctions as a precondition for rejoining the agreement. The West, however, remained wary of easing pressure on Russia, fearing it would empower Moscow to continue its aggression. The grain deal became a key bargaining chip in the negotiations. The United States and its allies recognized the humanitarian imperative of restarting grain shipments, particularly to vulnerable nations heavily reliant on Ukrainian and Russian exports. However, they also sought to prevent Russia from using the deal as leverage to extract concessions that would undermine Ukrainian sovereignty. Section 4, at the negotiating table, Faces of a Divided World. The weight of the negotiations rested on the shoulders of the delegations representing Russia and Ukraine. Each side brought its own perspectives, demands, and anxieties to the table. Leading the Russian delegation was Grigory Karasin, a seasoned diplomat known for his tough stance and close ties to the Kremlin. At his side was Sergei Beseda, a high-ranking figure in the FSB, Russia's security service. Their presence underscored the high stakes involved for Moscow, and the intricate link between security concerns and political objectives. Ukraine's delegation was headed by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, a figure who embodied Ukraine's resilience in the face of Russian aggression. Alongside him was Pavlo Palisa, a key presidential advisor on military affairs. Their presence reflected Ukraine's determination to defend its territorial integrity and protect its right to self-determination. Section 5. The Long Road to Peace, Can a Truce Hold? The ultimate objective of the Riyadh talks, as articulated by Stephen Witkoff, Trump's personal envoy to Putin, was ambitious yet necessary: a 30-day full ceasefire. This temporary cessation of hostilities, if achieved, would pave the way for more substantial negotiations aimed at securing a permanent truce. The proposed 30-day ceasefire, however, faced significant hurdles. Previous ceasefires had been short-lived, collapsing amidst accusations of violations and a lack of trust. Both sides remained suspicious of each other's intentions, and the potential for misunderstandings and renewed clashes loomed large. The international community recognized the 30-day ceasefire as a critical step towards de-escalation. It would provide a much-needed respite from violence, allow for humanitarian access, and create a more conducive environment for dialogue. However, the success of this ambitious goal hinged on the willingness of both sides to overcome deep-seated mistrust and demonstrate a genuine commitment to peace. Section 6. A gaping chasm. Obstacles to a lasting solution. Despite the glimmer of hope offered by the talks, formidable obstacles stood in the way of a lasting peace. The positions of Russia and Ukraine, shaped by years of conflict and mistrust, remained fundamentally at odds. Russia, under Putin's leadership, continued to demand Ukraine cease all military mobilization, training, and arms imports. Moscow insisted on a halt to all foreign military aid and intelligence sharing as preconditions for any truce. These demands, seen by many as attempts to cripple Ukraine's defense capabilities, underscored Russia's desire to maintain a position of military advantage. Ukraine, in turn, remained steadfast in its refusal to concede any territory. Kiev insisted on its right to pursue NATO membership, a move vehemently opposed by Moscow. Ukraine demanded security guarantees as an integral part of any peace deal, seeking protection against future aggression. Section 7. A skeptical world watches and waits. The limited progress achieved in Riyadh was met with a mixture of cautious optimism and deep skepticism. Analysts and officials, while acknowledging the importance of dialogue, cautioned against inflated expectations. The history of the conflict, marked by broken promises and renewed violence, tempered enthusiasm. Ukrainian officials in particular voiced concerns about Russia's willingness to negotiate in good faith. They pointed to Russia's continued military buildup near Ukraine's borders and its ongoing support for separatist groups as evidence of Moscow's true intentions. The memory of past agreements, violated shortly after they were signed, fueled this skepticism. The international community, while supportive of the US-led mediation efforts, remained divided on the best way forward. Some advocated for maintaining a tough stance on Russia, arguing that only sustained pressure would bring Moscow to the negotiating table in earnest. Others called for a more conciliatory approach, emphasizing the need to address Russia's security concerns to find a mutually acceptable solution. The truce talks in Riyadh, while a step towards peace, represented just the beginning of a long and uncertain journey. The limited ceasefire agreement, the resumption of the Black Sea grain deal, and the prospect of a 30-day full ceasefire offered glimmers of hope. However, the deep divisions between Russia and Ukraine, the lack of trust, and the complex geopolitical landscape surrounding the conflict posed formidable challenges. As the world watched and waited, the question remained: could this fragile truce hold, or would the guns of war once again drown out the voices